Hello, everybody.
Welcome back to the Other Side Lifestyle Podcast with Jim and Aram. If you are involved at all in current events or financial currency, you need to know who Austin Current is, the Indiana born and bred stallion of a man. He is a published author, The Science of Strength Training. He is a future professor. We are manifesting that now through our conversation before we got started. There is no doubt it's going to happen. And he's a super nice guy, super flexible. We had to move the time that we were meeting around because of me. And now he's taken a season off of snowboarding in Denver, just getting his body ready for 2 seasons straight, starting in 2024.
In terms of an AI synopsis of our previous conversation, that was just about perfect. Yeah.
I try to pay attention and listen.
Yeah, if you guys don't want to listen any further, you've basically got the broad strokes of what this guy does. He wrote a book, he snowboards.
I wasn't quick enough to think of more words that sounded like current. I could have went with a stream. He lives near a stream with a very strong current. All right, that's my last one.
Electricity is always an easy one. My dad's dad was an electrician for the school corporation, and he owned a business, Current Electric.
Wow.
So that's kind of, it's kind of set right up for you. I don't know why it's become one.
I mean, at that point, how do you not go into the field of electricity?
I know. Yeah, I missed a lot. I didn't go into anything that involves a current.
I mean, kind of. There's protons and neutrons inside your muscles.
And create my own, right? Yeah, there's ions, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I have nothing. I got nothing.
Well, guys, this gentleman here is somebody that I've been learning from for a very long time. The book Science of Strength Training is kind of considered a Bible to anybody who wants to learn how to figure out exercise in probably the most direct way that you'll get out there with very little fluff. He's the reason why I chose this man to speak on stage at the Real Coaches Summit is because the information that he puts out is practical, and every single day when you hop on his Instagram page, you're going to learn something that you didn't know before, or if you did know it, you're going to learn how to do it better. And that's why I think he's the perfect guest for this podcast, because a lot of people are lost when it comes to training.
Thank you.
I like it. I'm fired up now. Do you do in Denver? Do you do in-person stuff? Are you doing all online? What's your life looking like out there?
Yeah, so I do some in-person stuff. I went back part-time in person last year and started doing more in-person stuff last year. But basically, the 9 years leading into that, or 8 years leading into that, I was pretty much solely online. So I started out in person and then transitioned.
Aram, shut your dog up, Aram.
You can hear her?
Yeah.
Wow.
Not only can we,
She's
chewing
my other dog. Sorry, I can't do anything about it.
You can't do anything about it. We'll have to see if you could. We'll see if we can mute the whatever, the background noise. That's like an option. Anyway, you're welcome for listening to us chatter, that little section right there. So you're mainly online, and you start. Do you feel a new kind of like vigor with training, doing stuff in person?
That's a good question. It's a different feel. I think if you're a coach and you've been online for a while, it's a different feel. It's a different connection you get to that individual. Even if you do your damnedest to make a connection online, it's not the same. To go and show up and feel that person's energy and see their smile and I don't know, look in their eyes. It's just, there's something to it, right? And my clients aren't always that cheerful to see me every week, but regardless, you still have that feeling, right? That you get when you're in person, and there's a fulfillment aspect to it. And honestly, for me, a big part of it was I wanted to reconnect to my local community. I moved around a lot throughout my life, and I've kind of lost a sense of like having a community right there. and getting back and settling back in Colorado, and we bought a house, and so being able to kind of settle into this community was a big part of trying to kind of do that. And so, I helped put on seminars at that gym, free seminars just for the local member base. I just try to pour back into that the best I can, or as much as I can. And yeah, going back in person has been very fulfilling in that way. And I mainly train folks that are, 40s, 50s, 60s. So my clientele tends to skew higher or older than older on average than my online clientele by at least a decade. Typically, I would say it's somewhat of my norm clientele, but it tends to skew a bit older in person, which I do actually enjoy quite a bit to that aspect, because just to see a lot of those folks feel just more confident and empowered in that position is a cool feeling, because they're usually returning back to the gym after not being in there for decades. So it's a cool feeling.
And it's like a different goal too, probably for a lot of them, versus, I want to look this way. How come I'm not looking this way yet? Like, they see the value in what we probably all preach of, we just want to feel good and be able to experience life more through our bodies. So that's probably the cool thing, because I'm mid-40s, that's when I said ew. I'm up there.
Austin,
I know I don't look it.
Austin, is it safe to say that your expertise kind of falls into that hypertrophy training area?
I'd say that's where I specialize. That's where I've kind of specialized across my career. It's the circles I found myself in. I competed when I was young. I had a professional career when I was in my early 20s.
Competed on stage.
For bodybuilding.
Yeah, in the
Just want to, I'm like the guy who's clarifying everything, because I assume listeners aren't always knowing what everybody's talking about. And then Aram's like, our listeners aren't idiots. And I'm like,
well, clarifying's helpful. I think parenthetical statements are helpful in that way. So I as far as like my career as a trainee and a trainer, I started out, after sports ended for me, as most of us do, we need a kind of another competitive thing. And so I got talked into this bodybuilding thing. That was back in 2013.
How old were you when you're first
19.
being exposed? Okay.
Jesus, wow, that's young.
You're in school, you're going to college, or you're not in college, you're in school trying to do that whole thing, second year of college, and someone's like, let's ruin your life.
Well, essentially.
Let's diet competitively.
You look too happy. Let's get shredded.
I think I was, fortunately, I was kind of set up for it in many ways, especially the physique, because the physique category had just come out. And so it really was set up well, thankfully, for me to kind of like enter that world. And I probably didn't seem very happy. I probably seemed quite lost. And that was really kind of where that story began, of giving me something to attach myself to and to make me feel like I had some control over that part of my life again, which I felt like I didn't at that time. And so competing kind of came into my life then when I was 19. I had some success early on. I turned pro when I was 20, about 9 months later. So
That's insane.
That was quite the journey.
That's such a crazy arc of events, because I know people that have been going for 9-10 years and still didn't have their pro card.
Yeah, and I think it was the right place, right time. That especially as a natural guy and all of that, it was pre. I mean, obviously there was the physique guys were starting to gain a lot of size, and by the time I stopped competing in the IFBB, it was kind of like, I don't know if I can continue to like be competitive here unless I change my route, and I wasn't too interested in that, and so I was just like, here we go, this is fine.
Now let me ask you this, because obviously you're a muscular dude, but you're not one of these fucking massive meatheads like we see online that are former bodybuilders. Do you ever get shit as far as credibility online because you don't classically look the part, quote unquote, or you may not be, busting through all your T-shirts and then you're getting questioned on what you're talking about?
Credibility wise, not yet.
That's good. That's good. That gives me hope for our industry.
I definitely get a lot of. I've gotten more of. Don't you miss X, Y, and Z? Don't you miss looking like that? Don't you miss?
Okay, that's fair.
Do you?
Presenting? Obviously, the body dysmorphic part of my damaged brain certainly does.
We all have it, man.
Being the size or being the leanness?
Both.
Yeah.
Okay. When you're, just all of it, right? The energy, your early 20s. You're muscular, you're ripped, you're energetic, you're like ambitious for life. You're all these things, right?
How hard was your cock back then? Tell us about. Tell us about the rigor of that. That's what the people want to know.
That's 15 years ago. I don't even remember what that was like.
It's a short story.
Just leave that. Let that be.
It's a novella.
It's an anecdote.
You're welcome, ladies.
Oh, goodness.
But, you certainly miss aspects of it, of course. But I don't know. I don't know. It's similar to going through any part of life. It's embracing what's next. It's embracing kind of whatever that is, because we can't go backwards, right? So I don't see a purpose in even considering it.
Yeah.
And
how old are you now?
30. I'm not crazy old.
It's 10 years. 10 years from that, from competing and doing that.
Yeah.
So it's a decent amount of time. I'm with you though. There's too many people are living in the past with stuff. It's for like as you get older, like I said, I'm in my 40s, and you're gonna be 40 in like a few weeks, huh, Aram? And it's, to me, I love it.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
Every year, I'm like, every year's better.
Way better.
It's like, because I'm just not thinking about anything else. I think people too need to remember, like, you got out of something for a reason. Like the people who were fantasizing about, back in the day, they're single, they're going out, or on their own football team and all that kind of stuff. It's like, you found somebody and got married because you were ready to get out of that space. Why are you fantasizing about being back in that space? Like, instead of thinking about that, what is the thing that you can do now to make your life better right now? So that's good that you're not. I'm with you. I like that.
Yeah, I'm not interested in that life of what that is. And that version of myself facilitated this version, right? It allowed me to meet the people I met. It allowed me to become the man that I became. It allowed me to dig deep into a lot of parts of myself and learn who I needed to become to kind of enter this next chapter, I
love it.
And so I'm very grateful for that part of my life. I'm very grateful for that chapter of my life, but I'm also very grateful that it's over and I get to progress forward and not have to worry about random people I've never met judge me about, everything. Yeah. So, and I also enjoy not having to approach my content from a perspective of that any longer.
Getting validation from it and like seeking.
Yeah, everything had to go through that frame or that filter, right? It was like all in the context of like, well, it was a lot of justifying, right? It was like, oh, this, but I'm in my off season, so blah blah blah.
Yeah, exactly.
This and this, and it's like, bro, I don't care. Like live your life. If this is the way you're pursuing your life, great. I don't it doesn't matter to me. And if you have a teaching point, make it. If you don't, then why are you here?
Well, I think it's an important concept for the layperson to understand, because a lot of times they'll comb through social media content and they'll look at people that quote unquote look the part, right? They're shredded, they're lean, they're big, whatever. And then their audience is immediately giving them credibility and clout because of what they look like. And what they don't realize is that some of the best trainers and coaches in the world don't look the part anymore because they're just too fucking busy coaching people and teaching people how to do this stuff.
Even in sports, the best coaches weren't the best players.
Exactly. And I think it just sucks because, unfortunately, like, yes, you have a big following, which is great because you're finally getting out to the masses and more people will see your stuff. Versus there's a lot of good coaches out there that maybe have 20 or 30,000 or 4,000 like Jimmy, which nobody cares about his following at all.
Yo, I'm about to break 5K.
Well,
brother.
if you do, then maybe it'll finally matter.
It's finally. There's been like three times. There's been like 3 times, Austin, where I'll post when I'm getting close to some whatever number. I'm like, I need 19 followers to get to 3,800, or Aram's gonna stop being my friend, and we can't podcast anymore. So yeah,
the realities of this world are tough, Jim.
But
yeah, I just remind people too that his posts were just mine from 2 years
That's all
ago.
it is.
So that's the important part.
It's just the problem with like, especially with the way like, I don't understand the algorithm. I don't think any of us will really understand it, but I wish more information like yours, that practical, this is how you lift, this is what you should feel, this is how your setup should be. It's not sexy content, but it to me, it's a free education that your normal person won't be able to source anywhere unless they're paying a personal trainer $80 to $150 an hour, which most people can't afford. But unfortunately, the stuff that you do, which is practical and applicable, and I think the 40, 50, 60-year-old population should be hypertrophy training, they're not going to see that stuff. They're going to see the dickhead V-shred guy with his fucking shirt off doing burpees until he throws up. They're going to see some fucking booty model doing banded bullshit kickbacks. And they're never going to see any real training content because that stuff just doesn't circulate around as well. So I think it's so important for accounts like yours and people like you to start to get pushed into the forefront, because that's what people are missing, and that's where the education is going to start to get people to be autonomous.
Yeah.
What can we do as an industry to change this kind of outlook? Like what could be like a common thread or a common message that this year it's like we need to end this bullshit of all this stuff? Or is it just this is just the beast and we just got to show up authentically and that's kind of it?
I think you just change. Well, I think the only way to change it truly is change the approach and the mantra that is kind of a part of the collective, right? So be helpful rather than being famous. And right now, the incentives are geared towards being famous, not being helpful, right? And if you can join those, then you're a superstar. But rarely can you truly join those without conforming to the rest, right? So you kind of, you generally see on social, you have like 10 topics that circulate at any given time, that everyone's going viral on, that everyone has their own spin on, that everyone is copying each other on. And okay, that's the platform. Like that's the way that we're approaching this void that we exist in for hours a day. And I don't know what to do about that. Yeah. I don't think anyone does.
It's so weird too. Like it's just the idea and seeing people posting the exact same thing. Like, just dancing in a living room, and then I'm going to dance in a living room. And then the people at fitness do the same thing. Like, you got everybody's a vlogger now. Like trying to be what's the Christian guy? Christian Guzman. Yeah. The original one. Like everybody's doing the same format, the same style, the same look. It's wild to me. Just even people would want to present themselves exactly like somebody else. It's strange.
It is strange, and power. I mean, more power to you, I guess. But it's just not. I've had moments like that in my career, and it didn't align, and I didn't enjoy it in the same way. Like I really enjoy. There's parts of this there's a part of all of this that I do enjoy. Like I actually enjoy the getting creative shots or filming something from a new angle, or putting something together in a certain way. I used to do it a lot more in my editing than I do now, but there's parts of that creative process that I really do actually enjoy from an art perspective, but or just from an engagement perspective, of an entertainment perspective of how can I package this? Because there is, as much as we could sit here and kind of throw shade on creating infotainment, there is an aspect, I think there is a responsibility on behalf of a creator and an educator, and this goes, even into the teaching realm, where the best teachers and the best educators are those who can package something in a way where people can engage with it in the way that they can engage with it, right? And so, like the teachers you remember, the ones that were kind of had an edge, or they approached it from a different way, or they were funny, or they packaged it differently. It wasn't the same old drone of boring information being thrown at you of like, will this be on the exam? And it's like, yes, you need to know it. And it's like, you know, if you can get away from that, that's great. And so I do think there is a responsibility we have as creators. And I wrestle with that aspect of it a little bit. But thankfully I do enjoy that creative process. So there's an engagement that I have with that process as well that I think helps. But, you know, it's tough because where do you draw that line in the sand? Because you have to draw it yourself.
Yeah. And
so where does the info, like within the infotainment relationship, at what point is there a bias towards info or attainment? You know, and it's like a lot of it is kind of like on that entertainment continuum at the moment, with very little info and substance within the content itself. And, you know, bridging that gap is obviously the magic dragon. If you can do that, then you kind of crack the code. But just be helpful rather than being famous, I think is a good place to start, at least.
I think like, that's a good point to bring up. I mean, we can only hold ourselves to the standard of what our intention is. You can have a totally positive intention with doing something, you know, like Aram will do. He got a lot of hate for when he was showing his butt cheeks, making fun of people who were like, I'm just doing dishes, and they're showing their butt cheeks. Yeah. And we all know his intention was just to show his butt cheeks, not really to make fun. No, but I mean, all you could do is what your intention is, and people can hate on it. They can hate on it. It's more that what you said, and that's what triggered me to say it, that you are rewarded for being famous more than being helpful. And that's the thing that's just wild to me, that people do it solely for that. But I'm older. I mean, if I was 23 and in this space and this was like some big thing, maybe I'd be into it. So I understand people being into like editing and all the different angles and the art of it. I respect that, absolutely. I think in my head, I just picture all these young kids that are out there taking up space in the gym with their tripod and trying to be this influencer versus actually learning how to train people.
Yeah.
You're just being an influencer. You're not actually helping, actually training, actually providing any information.
Yeah, I mean,
well, there's an aspect to that process. Sorry, Aram, just really quick before I lose this thought. There's a part of that, man, where there's a deep-rooted insecurity of, are you good enough as a trainer to show up and do your job? Do you have the chops to back up what you're saying? That becomes more fulfilled as you lean more into learning the craft versus becoming known for the craft. And my ultimate objective, more or less, is I want to lean so far. This is my goal. And, you know, I fall short, I think, a lot, but my life goal of this career is kind of this, is to lean so hard into the craft that I become known for the craft.
Absolutely.
And if that does it, then great. But if it doesn't, then I've at least had a successful, respectable career. And there's few things you can hang your hat on more in life than he was a kind-natured, respectful, professional guy. It's like, to be known for that's good enough for me. Yeah. I don't need to be known as like, oh, well, he was super famous on this one platform that existed one time. It's like,
and how many countless people has he helped with that craft?
Yeah. And so if you can gain more confidence in the space, like if you can walk into the gym with a little bit more confidence, because again, like we have this bravado, right? We have this sort of caricature that exists out into the world, front facing, that we sort of mask our insecurities around what we do and do not know. And there's still a lot of people, millions and millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people around the world that genuinely either aren't engaging with physical activity at all, or the strength training or any type of resistance training. And if they are, they walk into the gym and the first thought they have is this pit of despair of like, I know I need to be here, but dude, I don't know what's happening. Like, I don't know. Like, I see equipment, I see people use it, but I get on and I'm just trying to kind of mock what they do. I don't quite understand what I'm doing. If it's not set up for me when I get on here, I don't quite know how to adjust it to make it fit. And now it hurts. Now I hurt my shoulder. Now the thing that I know I need to be doing, I can no longer do because I'm hurt now because I tried to do it. And like, it's all of those things that kind of like reside in the back of my mind of, again, like I used to care a lot more because I thought that was the path of like becoming more known. But at this point, it does kind of root itself in, as cliche as it can sound, like if I can genuinely just help out those people a little bit more, that allows me to just show up and film the video, right? Because if you have the masses in mind, if I imagine all the people that could possibly see this video, I get very weird, right? It's like I overthink it. I try to say things differently. It takes me, 5 takes to get the thing that I'm trying to say. But if I just imagine that one person that's just like it was my client showing up to the gym.
Right there with you.
It's just one take. I don't fluster through anything. It's just like, hey, really quick, I think this will help. Do this one thing. Align yourself like this. You see how this cable's adjusted? Adjust it down because you want it to align with this thing. Now go.
And that's the thing that I think is bothering most, because you get online right now and you have a lot of conflicting messages and imagery that are happening. It's like, well, you should turn your hand this way, but if you don't move your elbow here, you're not going to bias this crest of the lat. And for most people, none of that shit's going to matter because they don't even understand where their lats are, what they do, how they function. That basic knowledge of anatomy and biomechanics is just missing. And one of the things that I think we need to do as coaches is emphasize the importance of the basics of those things, but not harp on the nuances until they're earned at some point down the line.
And how great would that be if videos were introduced like this? Yeah. If you're new to the gym, this is not necessarily for you.
Correct.
Get on these machines, start getting to know them. Yeah. If you've been doing lat pull downs like this, and this looks familiar to you, here's something you can start to think about, a little tweak. Yeah. If you've been doing them like this for a while,
are you talking about context?
Here's something you can tweak. Yeah.
Context.
Like maybe that's the way that people can start explaining movements. You know, because how many people, when they see a certain minor technique, are like, fuck, that's why my lats weren't growing. I was internally rotating at the top of the one-handed single lat instead of keeping the neutral grip. That's why. Like, then people just feel even more frustrated.
Well, it's the difference between that person sharing that information with their buddy at the gym versus sharing it on Instagram, because the incentives of those two things are very different. The incentives of sharing it with his buddy at the gym is to immediately impact his buddy's workout in the way that it's most going to impact his buddy's workout, right? So it's very contextual to that, which ironically would probably help more people if he actually shared it like that. But the incentives in the way that they're set up is your take different enough to be shared, whether through disagreement or hate or love or all three? That's the combination of trifecta of virality. So if we can get all three of those, then we're surely going to hit 1,000 comments. We're surely going to hit 20,000 shares, and we're surely going to hit 10 million views on this video. And that's like, those two incentives are totally different, right? And it's just like, what game are you playing? And again, do you want to be right or do you want to be helpful? And that's the difference between so Science of Strength Training is my book, but this past year I've been working on transitioning in my career a bit, and I've created a new business, a new brand, separated from old ones, and I've built essentially a brand around the book, Science of Strength Training. And my goal with that is to focus on being helpful, not just to be right. And so my mission statement kind of for that brand on the About Me page on the website is I'll paraphrase it. It's like we've lost sight with what's actually important here, right? The industry has it twisted. We're more focused on being right than we are being helpful to those who need it most, right? And we spend 99% of our time focused on the 1% of people and how they can improve their workouts in a nuanced way.
Yeah, the optimization crew.
Instead of which again, like, has its merit. I'm not discounting that. Yeah. And it shouldn't be erased because there's importance there, but there's an importance for a very limited amount of people, right. Which again, I think that there's just there's too much of a bias towards the importance of that for the masses. Whereas we spend, ironically, probably 1% of our time trying to help the 99% of the people who actually need the help. Yep. So I've spent my whole career in that 1%, basically, right? Through the education that I've done, seminars, companies I've worked for, whatever. I've spent most of my, if not all my career, trying to really focus on the 1% of people who ultimately don't really need anyone's help. They are going to grow up to be healthy, strong, capable individuals, and continue to strength train throughout their life. Great. But what about the rest of the people, right? And I think that's just a part of getting older and maturing in your life and in your career is, again, I care. It's not that I don't care about like, hey, you come to me and you're like, hey, bro, I just want to get bigger arms and chest and lats. And it's like, okay, I can help with that. Because I understand there's something there that the pursuit of that could be great for you. Could give you something to focus on, X, Y, and Z. But it's also very productive. But it means less to me than, hey, I am out of shape. I have high blood pressure. I'm on all these medications. I sit there and I look at my kids and I know if I don't change this, I'm not going to be here for them. And that means a hell of a lot more to me. And that's a pursuit that I am so much more invested in at this point in my career than, hey, bro, I want 2 more inches on my arms because these shirts that I love, I'm not filling them out, And it's not to discount that at all, but it is to say I just have a bias and a lean towards the former there, and that just means so much more to me. So that's kind of where I'm taking my career up to, beyond this point, and trying to kind of blend those worlds the best I can and be there to kind of exist in the middle, because I also just can't sit there and talk about the most basic thing in the most basic way, because that's not the way my brain is wired. It's not how I've learned this information. It's not how I speak. It's not how I articulate the information. But what I think I can do, and what I feel like I tried to do with the book, and I think it's been somewhat successful, is how can I bridge the gap between those two worlds and kind of take you from where you are now to closer to where you want to be, right? How can I kind of be the conduit between the most basic information and the most advanced and try to make sense of it for you? Because once you understand the advanced, you understand it's actually not that complicated. It's just the amount of information you need to know to understand that in a contextual way becomes more difficult. But if I can use what I've learned and all of the years of learning it to make this information make more sense for you, then I think that's a noble pursuit on my behalf, and at least it's a fulfilling one for me, and it's what I'm going to try and do.
Yeah, I mean, you need to understand the basics in order to even understand the nuance. We're in this time of where people are trying to explain the nuance because they heard it from somebody else,
and they don't understand the basic.
So that's a problem. So that's a nice.
It's a tough battle.
Yeah, it sounds like that's what you're doing.
So
is bridging that.
So let's talk to the 99%, because I think most of our viewers aren't wet behind the ears completely, but let's say they do have some missing pieces. So I'm going to throw. I was thinking about this last night because these are conversations I have constantly with my clients, and I want you to answer a couple of these questions for me if you wouldn't mind. Number one, what the fuck is progressive overload, and why do we care about it?
So our body adapts to stress, right? So if we have less stress, our body has no need to adapt. If we have an equal amount of stress, our body will ultimately stay relatively the same to adapt to that need. If we want to continue to adapt in a positive way towards getting stronger, getting more muscular, or having more skill proficiency or more coordination or what have you, we need to continue to progress that forward. We need to continue to stress the system in a way that it is going to have to adapt to get better. And to me, like that's the most simple form of progressive overload. Progressive overload is an umbrella term for these tools and tactics that we use to facilitate that process, right? So whether it's adding more weight or improving our form, maybe changing our setup slightly based off of a progression or a regression. Maybe it's the tempo at which we lift that weight with. Maybe it's, depending on the adaptation, maybe it's the rest period that we use between sets. It's so many things. And it's not just weight on the bar, although that is a component of it. It's so much more than that. And even something feeling easier than it did a previous week with better technique, that's progressive overload, right? So it encompasses, it's really kind of this umbrella term that encompasses so much. But generally it's understanding that the importance of that comes with, we need to force our body to adapt, because a lot of these adaptations are very expensive. And they take a lot to manufacture. And so, but they are important, not only for our survival, but for our ability to thrive kind of through our life in general. So hopefully that's a helpful way of putting it.
As he's saying it, I'm just like, it's exposure therapy.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
Basically.
Progressive.
It's graded exposure. Yeah.
It's exposure therapy.
So further to that, I think a lot of folks are going to be lost so they'll hear that and they'll say, cool, I understand that. So it means every week I have to go up in weight or in reps or in sets, or I have to slow, whatever. I'm going to manipulate one of these myriad of variables. Now, where people get lost in the sauce with is when is something too light? When is something too heavy? And when the hell do I start to actually adjust my variables to start to produce a change? Like, I think people feel lost in that arena. So if you can give people a couple of basic pointers on, this is what would be deemed too light, this was what would be deemed too heavy, and this is when you should be ready to move on to that next thing.
Yeah, I think we cop out a lot. I notice myself doing this when I run, because I'm not natively a runner. When it gets hard, I stop. When it gets hard, I talk myself out of it.
Like you should.
Yeah, you and me both, pal.
Yeah. But I think that's a common thing, right? I think a lot of people could relate to that. And I think a lot more people have experience with running and stopping because it got hard, because they're like, ooh, this feels challenging, I should stop. And it's the same thing within the strength training realm when you're going through any type of exercise. But also as a runner, like, that's not when you stop. Like, hey, dude, You're fine. Keep going. Pace yourself, but you're good. Like, you don't need to stop. Your body will be fine. And it's the same sentiment within the strength training realm, where as soon as it starts feeling hard, you don't have to stop there, right? And so, to me, an indicator I share with my clients often is around rep speed, right? So, especially through the concentric. So, let's say the easy one is an arm curl or something. As you're flexing your elbow, you're bringing that dumbbell up towards your shoulder. Let's say the first, and your goal, you're somewhere within that 8 to 10 rep range, right? Once you start getting to, rep 6, oh, it's starting to feel hard. Rep 7, it feels a bit harder. Rep 8, ooh, my rep speed's starting to slow down a bit. My first rep doesn't look like my 8th rep. Okay, that's a good thing. That means we're getting closer to the point of failure, and you're probably a few reps shy of where that point is for you. Whether you can access that yet or not, you're around that point, right? So generally for people, I try to point them towards, hey, identify when these reps get hard, and then where's the gap between where it's hard and where that rep starts to really slow down for you. That's the place where you want to get more comfortable. And we're going to try and get more comfortable there, right? So if it's something that we're doing, if it's work that we're trying to do to get someone more comfortable there, well, I'm going to keep the rep range the same. I'm going to try and keep them continuing to use similar loads. And I'm going to try and get them more comfortable with what that feels like for them, right? And so the more comfort, that's the difference between also a beginner and advanced trainee is when you watch, rep 1 won't look like, if it's if we're going for 10 reps, rep 1's not going to look the same as rep 10. But how in it mentally they are will be. They're as into rep 1 as they are into rep 10.
Yeah, when you're experienced,
the same.
Yeah, you're like, I want that weight where I'm getting to that hard point earlier, because that's what you're chasing. Yeah. Like, who wants to do 15 reps? And then, how much harder is it to fail when you're at a weight that takes 15 to 20 reps? You really, it's
I don't
tough.
enjoy it.
Yeah, it's like, how boring when you have experience is the 12 reps it takes to get to that point where you're like, oh shit, now it's slowing down. I can't lift it up as quickly. So that's a great point. I never even thought about that.
And you're trying to basically widen that gap, right? So as you get more advanced, from when it gets hard to when those reps start to really slow down and you hit failure, that gap just starts to widen as you get more advanced, right? And so the earlier on you are, those are really close together. And so typically, as I sit here and say, like, as it starts to feel hard, you're not done yet. You're still okay. You still have a few reps left. So lean in, engage with that, and feel that. But as you get more advanced, and we all in this room know, it's like, as soon as that starts to feel hard, you could also have 10 more reps, truthfully, in you.
I was gonna say, like, how many times have you seen somebody or experienced it, and you're like, they've got 2 more. That was a tough one. And then they do 5 more, 6 more. Yeah. Like, that's the difference. Well, absolutely.
Especially on a lower body exercise where you have multiple muscle groups working in
I just quit
in conjunction
on the
together.
Lower body.
If
it starts to hurt, I'm like, okay, that's good.
I think it's much easier. Well, and then discuss this for a minute, Austin, because I think this bothers people too, right? Like, single joint movements, leg extensions, hamstring curls, bicep curls, tricep extensions, especially if they're done on a machine or on a cable, relatively low risk of injury, high potential for being able to overload and kind of go through even some partial reps, which obviously is a little bit more of an advanced category of understanding. But people always get really pissed off. They're like, well, my leg press is going up by 5 or 10 pounds a week, but my lateral raise is just stuck at 12 and a half pounds and I can't get any higher. What advice would you give to those people to get them to think about other things outside of just trying to go up in weight on exercises that just aren't feasible to go up in weight in?
Yeah, I mean, just understanding just that fact that you mentioned, right? It's the difference between a compound multi-joint exercise and a single joint isolation-based exercise. There's less tissue involved. There's less ability for other tissues to come in and assist. And so by nature, you're not going to progress as quickly within those. But understanding that this is where we have an opportunity to improve upon, well, what's our range of motion like? Can we get deeper into these reps? Can we slow these reps down and feel more of a stretch here? Can we extend fatigue a little bit further? Can we extend the distance between the weight we choose, where the distance between where it feels hard and where we fail gets bigger, right? That's kind of where I start to really focus in. Because at the end of the day, like, I was doing chest flies, a few days ago, and there's only so much, especially unless you want to add a bunch of implements to your body. You can add a dip belt with some weights on it if you want to add more artificial body weight on yourself, so the weight of the cable fly on the eccentric doesn't lift your body off the ground. So there is a nature of kind of so much weight you can theoretically lift on, like a cable fly, for example, because your body weight's only so much, right? You can only counter or oppose so much load in some of these exercises, again, unless you want to use a couple different tools. But so within that, what I did, because I don't have a dip belt at home, and so what I did was I chose a weight was kind of like, I could feel where that counterbalance was starting to wane a bit. And if I would have went up any more, my stability would have been thrown off completely. And so what I did there is, okay, how can I slow down these reps? How can I feel the deep stretch here? Can I pause there? Am I comfortable with that? And then can I grind through the concentric? And how far can I go into that? Right? And so I chose a weight. My first weight I chose, it's like my top end of my rep range was 10. And it was like, I hit 15 set one. So I'm like, okay, there's an adjustment I need to make. I can go up and load here. Great. Second one, I hit 12. It's like, great. I can keep going. I can keep going up. So, or I can make these reps even slower, or I can extend this even further. And so I think understanding that there's just a different nature to that. And you can also do that within multi-joint compound exercises as well. But the necessity of that being one of the only ways you can truly progress within that movement for a while changes, right? Because again, the multi-joint movements, we have other muscle groups that are there to assist. We tend to be able to continue to progress those at a higher rate than the single joint isolation ones. So I think it's just understanding that there is an innate difference between the two, and that it's totally fine to have a different way of progressing on these movements. And again, you can always add sets if you need more volume. Again, you can change the tempo, you can change the rep ranges, you can increase load within that. So some of those too, where you tend to plateau with rep ranges on these isolation movements. Yeah. I do actually tend to add more advanced methods there where I'll either decrease the rep range, so I'm forced into increasing intensity, or I'll do things like cluster sets where I'm essentially doing, a 12 rep. I'm hitting 12 reps, but I'm splitting it up into sets of 4, and separated by 15 to 20 seconds between. So I'm hitting a 12 rep range at a much, much higher intensity than otherwise relatively would be. And, that can help kind of extend yourself past a plateau that you may be at. So there are these more advanced methods towards approaching those things. But also understanding too, just to round that out, that's if you're super into advancing within that. Mm-hmm. But
it's making me think of the person who diets and they're only looking at the scale.
Yeah.
And that when you're only looking at how come I'm not getting quote unquote stronger, well, let's look at other things. How are you feeling digestively? Is there a measurement at your waist that's a little bit smaller? Are clothes fitting better? Is your sleep getting better? Are you less hungry throughout the day? There's all these other things you could be looking at, but you're just looking at the scale. And the way you just painted all the different ways that you could be looking at what you think is a plateau, and ways that you can explore that differently. Like, hey, let's see if I can do this slow. Like, so Aram, great question. When you're even referencing lateral raises, like, can you hold it at the top for a second before bringing it down? Like all these little things that somebody can do to be able to see improvement instead of just the number on the barbell, the dumbbell, or the scale, I think is huge. That's the analogy I'm thinking of as you were explaining all the different ways that somebody could progress.
You mentioned stability, and I want to take that a little bit further. So, why is stability such an important factor when we're strength training? That's question number one. And then follow-up question to that is, at what point do we start to value machine versus free weight, and why would we make those considerations?
So, to me, stability needs change as you become more advanced and adapt to the skill of what you're doing. So this is how I use the need for stability within the way I approach all of this. And there's a lot of different ways to approach this, right? So, if you were to ask, like Dr. Jordan Shallows from like Prescript, he may have a different answer on stability because his approach to what he's doing. But the way that I use stability, the way that I consider and think about it is, what stimulus am I trying to create? What stress am I trying to create for that system? And what type of skill do you have to facilitate that stress on your system? Because if you spent your whole life training to some capacity, right? I started strength training when I was around 11 or 12 years old. And so by the time I was 19 and started competing, and I was looking to really change my body composition, well, I had 7 years at that point where I had been squatting, bench pressing, doing a lot of different movements, power cleaning, doing about a deadlifting, you name it. I've been doing all of those things already. Okay, so I had a high level of skill within all of those movements.
I'd heard that you were benching 185 when you were 12. Is that rumor true?
I can't speak to it legally. There's a case to be made there. But we'll keep that for the lawyers to discuss in federal court. But
he said he was natty. He was natural at 19, but prior to that, he was not natural.
Correct.
Yeah. I did. No, I will say I was benching. I think I was benching 185 in like 9th grade or something. I think that was the realistic
That's pretty awesome
nature to that. But anyways, as far
It's what we do here. It's what we do.
It couldn't matter less to those who's listening. But so when I think about stability, and the way that I use it is for programs and how I program for real life people is, again, how much stability do you need to feel safe and comfortable to elicit the stimulus you need for the adaptation you're after, right? So if we're in a position where we want, we're dealing with insulin sensitivity issues, we're dealing with achy joints, we're dealing with, we have extra fat and energy on our body we want to get rid of. We want to do that in a way where we're not creating a bunch of unnecessary inflammation, because again, that could harm the insulin sensitivity component of what's going on through inflammation. There's all those components that are kind of running through your mind. And so when I think about external stability, it's okay, well, you're new to this. So I'm not necessarily going to put you into a back squat, a free weight based movement. I'm going to put you into a leg press. I'm going to put you into a hack squat. I'm going to put you into something that has a lot of external stability that helps you dig deeper safely. And it allows you to confidently learn not only these movement patterns, but also learn how to elicit the stimulus and stress that we're after for our body, so we can productively not only engage with the process, but productively progress towards that goal that we have. And so in a lot of ways, I think of stability very contextually to that individual and how much skill they have within moving their body and how much body awareness they have. And generally, what type of adaptation am I looking for? How do they manage fatigue? All of those factors is kind of what I'm looking for.
So I have a question.
I have a question. Hold on a second.
It's about that.
This is better. Perfect example. No, just so people understand. Perfect example of what Austin's talking about right now is doing a chest fly on a bench, on an inclined bench with cables, versus doing a chest fly with cables but standing up. Right? Like if you're standing up, are you focused on the muscles that are supposed to be being worked, or are you focused on stabilizing your body upright in space? And now you're starting to take something away from those intended muscle groups, which are the pec major. So I always want people to visualize certain examples when it comes to exercises. Something as simple as like a squat's a perfect example too, because like you said, to put a barbell on your back and squat is a much more challenging endeavor because all these joints are moving at the same time, versus sticking somebody into a V squat machine, which is essentially just allowing them to hinge and sit down and stand back up. They don't have to worry about proprioception or where their body is in space and how to manage it. It's interesting though, because you want to do that for the beginner, and then you start to find this freedom as an intermediate. But then when you come back as an advanced person, you almost want to go back to that level of stability because you want to keep pushing more heavy weights.
So this is my question. We're like made for each other. It's like you segued.
I'm right, segue inside.
Because I'm at the point I have zero desire to get under a barbell for a squat.
Same.
To get anything more, like I have no reason to squat more than 185 to 225 for reps at this point in my life. I need to be able to hold my parents over my shoulder and carry them up the steps if I had to. I'd much rather be leg pressing. Mm-hmm. Is there going to be a difference? Because this can sometimes be the debate that people have. No, you got to do this or you got to do this. So these people that are thinking this one's better than this one's better than this, there's always the context of, well, what's your goal? Yeah. I don't even know how to ask the question, but I think you know what I'm asking. Go ahead.
Machine or free weight, I think, is what Jimmy's trying to regurgitate out.
And is there really a difference at the end of the day for the average person who's trying to have strong joints, grow muscle?
Tools in the gym are tools in the gym. That's it.
No, we're talking about equipment, not people. Go ahead.
Yeah, well played. So the things, everything that exists in the gym, from a non-human perspective,
thanks for the
exists there. Yeah, exists there as a tool to place resistance on your body, right? To adapt to a stress. And so whether that's cables, cables are valuable because they allow us to better fit things to our structure. They allow a more consistent resistance. They allow us to kind of break gravity in that way, where we can just move gravity all of a sudden. to be horizontal now as far as the resistance goes, because if we're only using free weights, then we're limited by gravity only going up and down. So, cables are great for that. Machines are great for that in similar ways. Machines are now adding a level of external stability there that give us a sense of opposing force and proprioception that not only gives us stability, but also ensures that we're safe and we're comfortable, we're stable. And we can create a lot of output there, and we can maybe go deeper into fatigue there more safely. And so they're all implements. They're all implements and tools to elicit a stress and a form of resistance through our joints, through our connective tissues, and through our muscle. And so it just depends. And then you want to change as far as exercise selection goes. It's like, well, what are you trying to adapt to? Are you just in there to get better at moving through space and place resistance on your joints, connective tissue, and muscle tissue? If that's the case, then we ideally just want to choose movements that align well with your structure, that don't give your joints a ton of stress, that allow you to train reasonably hard without making you hate the rest of your day, and that allows you to continue to show up daily throughout the week, or most days of the week. And can we do that in a way that allows you to consistently progress and overload things over time and across your life, right? But if you're training to get better at picking your parents up off the ground, well, then maybe we need to be more selective.
Yeah, they could fucking get their shit together and not have to just be falling all the time.
Right. And that's for a family counselor to walk you guys through. But, I don't have the time to take you guys through that. But, and so, if you're training for something specific, then your needs become more specific. The tools and implements you use become more specific. Yeah. But if you have general goals of getting stronger, more muscular, and just becoming healthier across your life, there's a lot of ways to do that. Yeah.
I'm not going to grind out a squat anymore.
You don't need
but
to.
I'll grind out an extra 3 reps on a leg press.
Yeah, and that's great, because that's the stress you need to facilitate the adaptation you're after, right? To get better at life and to be strong and to challenge your muscles, not only as a muscular system, but also as an endocrine organ, something that allows you to really manage a lot of things across your body, but hormonally, and from an energy intake and output perspective. These things are very valuable tools that allow us to live healthier lives, especially as we use them more and more, and they become more efficient at helping us manage blood sugar and insulin and all of these things that we talk about all the time. So, or the energy intake through those processes. So they're all tools. And I think we all like to we all romanticize our methods over others. I think that's just a part of being human. I think we're a storytelling species. And I think that it's really how our language has formed who we are in the world. And we exist through stories, right? Whether it's narratives that we tell ourselves or narratives that we tell others. And fortunately and unfortunately, it's in a large way what dictates our life, both personally and professionally. And so I think there's a lot there that we need to kind of look in the mirror at and understand that, hey, is this narrative benefiting those who I'm speaking to, those who need my help? And if the story that I'm telling myself isn't actually that helpful or that conducive to creating change in others, well, I may need to change my story a bit. Yeah. Or I may need to mad lib this thing to death until it becomes more relevant to that person. And to me, that's okay. That's kind of what you do as a coach, is you take the experience that you have from working with hundreds and hundreds of people across your career, and thousands of people, whatever, and all of those interactions, all of those problem-solving moments that you're putting yourself through with your client, just become this reservoir in this bank or this zip file that you get to call upon at any one time and say, oh, I actually helped someone through that. This is how we did it. And this is how I do it relative to the challenges that you're facing, right? Or, hey, I've dealt with, I've had 100 clients with a very similar knee issue or similar hip issue. Here's how we dealt with it. We chose these tools. They built up strength in these areas. They allowed us to progress towards these things. And then we eventually graduated, if you're open to it, to trying these things. And it's, again, like, it doesn't have to be more complicated than that. And you don't owe anyone anything. And the story that you're telling yourself can change at any given time. Like we aren't stitched to these stories. We're just existing with all of them at any given time, and which one benefits the thing you're trying to do. And so,
yeah,
that's as complicated as it gets.
Yeah, it's like, what's the best workout program? The one that you enjoy. We've all heard that phrase, but we have to add to that the one that you enjoy that doesn't get in the way of what your goal is.
Yep.
Because how many people, they want to have this quote unquote toned body, this and that, but all they're doing is Beachbody Boot Camp or Orange Theory or this and that. Well, if that's not getting you to your goal, even though you enjoy it, you might have to change it. But you hate getting under a barbell like me at my age, go do a leg press. You don't feel comfortable with the free weights, go do machines. You have fun doing bicep curls with the dumbbells because they're big enough, because you finally got strong enough, go enjoy them. Do them. They're not getting in the way of what your goal is.
Yeah.
Can we?
And also, what's the rest of your life look like in that capacity, right? So your goals extend beyond the physical. So if 6 days a week for 2 hours could theoretically facilitate your goal the best, well, then that's not conducive to having where are your values outside of the gym? Well, you want to be around for your family. You want to make progressions within your professional career. You want to X, Y, and Z. You want to be less neurotic. You want to be a little bit more free with your day to day. Like, all of those things matter and all factor in. So all of those shape the way you approach it, rather than just like, what's the best thing for me to do in here? Well, it's like, well, this is the best based off of all the other things that are happening in your life as well.
Yeah, there's no, and that's like, there comes a maturity with that in life to have that perspective and understand that. I mean, I say that stuff all the time. Well, what do you really want? You're saying you want this, but you want to go out and party and do this and have all this social time and do all these things with the kids and go on all these vacations, but then you're complaining that you don't have the perfect body. You say you want this, but you also want this. Like, what do you really want? And something's going to give a little bit in one regard or the other if you push too hard on this side of things. Yeah. Aram, you were going to say.
Two more technical questions for you. So anybody that's following a lot of lifting content on social media is probably going to be exposed to the idea of what is it that causes muscle growth? What mechanism causes muscle growth? Some people have talked about time under tension. Some people have talked about, well, when you go into the gym and you train a muscle, it breaks down and then it rebuilds, and that's how it grows, and that's the facilitator of muscle growth. Now we're starting to have the conversation more often and more in the mainstream of mechanical tension. That seems to be the one that's the most popular, and that seems to be the one that's least understood. So if there's a way for the layperson to understand what mechanical tension is, I would love to hear that explanation.
So as far as mechanical tension goes, it's the tension that's created between 2 points, right? And your muscle goes through a process of lengthening and a process of shortening. And the tension that's created between those 2 points turns into a chemical signal based off its magnitude and duration, and tells your body to do something based off of that, right? If it reaches a certain threshold, it tells your body, hey, run this system. We got a lot of stress here. There's a lot of demand, and it's happening for most of the day, right? Or it's happened for a long time here. So let's deal with this accordingly. And to purists out there, that may not be the best answer, but generally to folks, like, I think that's helpful enough and specific enough to get you to the point of understanding, hey, creating tension within muscles, and a significant amount of it, is very important. And it seems to be the main indicator or the main communicator between the external load that you're creating or using and the internal systems that need to run and the internal communication that needs to happen within your body, right? So similar to sound, right? So sound is just sound waves entering your head or communicate or interfacing with your mind in some way, whether through its vibrations on your skull or through your inner ear, and then it's turned into something that we then understand based off of learning and whatever else. And so it's an external thing that our body turns into an internal mechanism of something, right? And that's generally what mechanical tension is, in some capacity. So I don't know if that's helpful in many ways, but it seems that mechanical tension is the most important thing that we need to create for these adaptations to occur. And mechanical stress, things like fatigue, getting a pump, that burning sensation we get, all of these things, that seems to then feed into, that has a two-way relationship with mechanical tension. So mechanical stress and mechanical tension seem to have this interplay between one another. And the higher the mechanical stress we get, the higher the mechanical tension we get, right? They have this interplay of relationship, but there is a cost to that. And so the cost to that is mechanical damage, right? So there's only so much damage a system can sustain and not be damaged from it, or a threshold of stress that a system can sustain without being damaged from it. I use this analogy of it's the difference between, we've all seen these cars, right? It's the difference between a Honda Civic with a really crappy early 90s Honda Civic that hasn't been well taken care of, but someone bought it and threw a terrible muffler on it. And they drive that thing as if it's a high performance sports car, right?
Well, there's a spoiler on it, obviously, as well.
Yes. I mean, you want to work on the drag and you want to stay on the ground because there is risk that thing will leave the ground. But it's right. So in terms of systems and what your system's able to adapt to, it's how high are you able to redline that machine without it breaking down versus a Ferrari that's literally built to redline, and it's literally built to handle that stress as much as you can give it in many ways. Obviously, those systems break too. Those engines break as well, but not as frequently as the Honda Civic, early 90s Honda Civic would if you push it to that degree, right? So every system has a different threshold of stress that it can manage and reliably adapt to or handle without damaging or breaking shit. And so you have to obviously the human body is not a car. It's not an internal combustion engine. It's not a computer. It's not all of these things, but it isn't that dissimilar from many aspects of those things, at least in regards to kind of explaining the way these processes, at least theoretically, work or handle stress. So, your system has an amount of stress that it can handle without shit starting to break, right? And things becoming a little bit stressed is not breaking, right? But if you stress those things too much, they will break. And that's kind of where mechanical damage comes into play, or muscular damage comes into play. We create a lot of muscular tension. Okay, great. There's a threshold that seems to increase of how much mechanical tension we need to create to continue to adapt. Again, that's the progressive overload nature of it.
And that's where you're starting to consider sets and reps, right? When you start to get more advanced and your body adapts to further and further stress, your need for volume or more volume will start to go up theoretically.
Exactly. And that's volume, and then how close you are to failure. So your intensity of effort, all of those things have an interplay into one another. And there used to be a thought of muscular damage was a part of it. It seems that muscular stress or mechanical stress and muscular tension or mechanical tension have this interplay relationship, this two-way communication channel of, if we get too much mechanical tension, we get mechanical stress. If we get a lot of mechanical stress, we get more mechanical tension, and they have this interplay between one another. And the cost of those things is mechanical damage or muscular damage. And we used to think that, or people who research these things used to think that mechanical damage or muscular damage has a bigger relationship with that interplay, similar to the other two. But it seems at this point, the understanding is moving more towards it's just a cost of doing business
versus the driver.
It's just something you have to manage. Yeah, it's something you have to mitigate and manage. And the more advanced you get, the more of the other two you have to create. Therefore, the more potential risk for that damage occurs, and the more you have to do load management, periodization, all of these things, graded exposure to stress. Like all of these things play into the cost of doing business, right? And the cost of doing business, unfortunately, is the damage you're creating and the soreness that comes from that. But the soreness is just an indicator of like, hey, I think we did too much here. Pull back a bit. All right? Or give me more resources so I can give me more men on the job.
Yep.
I need more people here to help me.
AKA food.
Facilitate this. Right.
Oh, I was thinking Trent.
Or sleep. Or anabolic steroids.
So as far as like mechanical tension goes, it is the most important thing. And that's generally what we're after. It's what we're trying to create within strength training. It's the most bang for your buck. And then obviously mechanical stress has a component there that interplays with mechanical tension. And then the cost of doing business is muscular damage or mechanical damage. And that's, to me, like the most helpful way of kind of considering these factors.
Yeah, I mean, that's all the technical questions I had for you. I mean, we can go down the volume rabbit hole, but I feel like that would be like part 2 of a podcast. That would be an hour and a half long.
Yeah.
So in order to protect all of our time today and to not have our listeners' heads blow off their shoulders, couple of parting words from you. What are you going to be talking about at the event in March, and why should people be excited about it?
Yeah. Remember, what you say right now might determine if the last 25 tickets get sold. So no pressure.
Yeah.
No pressure.
Ways of creating more efficient, more effective client-centric programs, mainly focused at the general population.
Nice.
So, I've spent a lot of time working with the general population, and I've also spent a lot of time working with more advanced folks, competitors, athletes, people that compete professionally or have been in the Olympia or you name it. I've spent time training those people, but I've spent even more time training the general population, and I've learned a lot from both. And ways of creating, we often approach program design for the general population in a way that, or being informed by the more advanced people. But to me, those are a different beast. Yeah. And those are different intentions that you go in with. And they're different frameworks of creating a practical and effective program for those two different populations. And so at the conference, I'm hoping to kind of walk people through my approach, my framework of how do we just create well-rounded, efficient and effective programs that get the job done and get you in and out. It meets those minimum threshold demands of what is needed to adapt and become healthier, become more functional, become better at life physically. And yeah, that's generally what I'm going to be talking about there. And hopefully that makes sense.
It'll be perfect for the audience that's going there.
Yeah.
It's perfect for the audience that's going there. That's awesome. Every guest has done this. So this is what we're going to have you do. And since well over 100 people have already done this, you will as well. You have to take your shirt off and show us what your body looks currently.
I'm not doing that.
Wow. 110 people. And this guy, I'm just kidding. Wow. We've never done that before. I was just sick.
Dr. Mike Israel just volunteered too. So
yeah, I was just tired of being soft for so long.
Yeah.
No. Anyway, we appreciate your time, man. This was great, very insightful, enlightening. I'm excited to see your talk in March and get to meet you. I will not grow a beard. Just so I can be a little bit different from you guys. I just shaved mine off today, but yours might be the nicest one we've seen.
He's got the nicest
so far. So thank you, man, for your time. Go buy the book, The Science of Strength Training. Is that right? That's the title?
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. Follow him on Instagram. It's in the show notes.
It's on my book list.
It's on his book list. Not the red list yet.
No, I give that list to. It's on the list of books I give to all my clients to familiarize themselves with.
Oh, thank you, man.
I like it. Well, thank you, man. And our last question, really quick and easy, this or that. Bye.